Good morning.
Morning.
Please feel free to adjust your seat if it's easier to see. I'm very happy this morning to see that some people are wearing masks and some people are not. My fear was that no one would be wearing a mask and there would be kind of too much pressure on people who wanted to wear a mask to feel like you're the only one, or that everyone's wearing a mask and the other way. This is a delicate time, and I'd just like to ask everybody to, not only here at the temple, but in your larger life, to stay receptive to the delicacy, that we're in, and to care for each other, to care for people in the community, different places that you go, because very easy to just decide you're right, or think or just be sick of things, or don't want to think about it, or whatever it is, and just kind of plow forward. And it's really important that we take these steps as things are starting to change, with some care. And we don't know week to week what may happen. And so here at the temple, people will be paying attention to that and thinking about it and staying receptive to the conditions on the ground and trying to make good decisions in relationship to that. So this week I'd like to continue to speak on the wisdom of receptivity. And last week I spoke mostly, I don't know if theoretically is the right word, but maybe philosophically about this. And I'll do a little recap of that this morning, and then I'd like to go into what is the practice of this kind of receptivity that I'm proposing. One of the things that I think is very an image or a way of thinking about practice that the Buddhist tradition gives to us is the idea of a spiritual body. That we have many layers of our being, and one of those layers of our being is material. And when we think about our biological being, we can think about it in a material sense. And we have a body which is biological and is material. But along with that, we have a psychological body, we have an emotional body, we have a spiritual body, we have a social body. We have all kinds of layers of things that we could call bodies. And to take up a spiritual practice, one of the things that we're doing, or maybe the thing we're doing, is to cultivate this spiritual body. Not to the exception of the cultivation of these other layers of our body, because actually they're all completely intertwined with each other, but we can put some focus on the spiritual body. And most spiritual teachings are pointing us to that. These days, I think there's a strong emphasis on embodiment. This is in response to domination, disregard, disempowerment of various kinds of bodies that have been othered and devalued. If you can hear that and not feel emotional, I would ask you to pay more attention to that in your life. That this is, in one way, a natural thing, but it is highly diluted and highly damaging. It is violent. And we need to pay closer and closer attention to this. Domination, disregard, disempowerment of embodiments that are othered and not cared for, not regarded. And so when we talk about cultivating the spiritual body, we should pay attention to this dynamic of domination, of disregard, of disempowerment, because it doesn't only live in an externalized world in the way that we treat each other and various embodiments, but it lives through our spiritual body as well. When we think about embodiment, when we consider that, there's a way in which it can become rigidly externalized. And I'll talk a little bit about that this morning, an invitation to practice. But rigidly externalized, what I mean is getting caught in the idea that your body is something other than yourself. Like, I just have a body. People will say that all the time. Well, it's just my body. I just have a body. Right? It becomes so outside, right? As if there's a real me inside here, like pulling the levers. Like, what was those shows we saw when we were a kid? That there was they're like the fighters, and there was a movie about it. They come from the bottom of the ocean. Yeah, and you got the guy inside of it, who Gundams. Yeah, those big robot fighters, and then there's a little person inside. Anyway, if you don't get the reference, it's fine. Don't think about it too much. But we kind of think that's how we are, right? Like there's a really, really real me, which is inside here somewhere, and then there's my body. That is what I mean by rigidly externalized. We think a body is kind of like a luggage. This is a sleight of hand of the dominating spirit. It's kind of the devil's bargain. It's like, okay, everyone can be spiritual, everyone can be accepted. We're not going to talk about embodiments. We're not going to talk about how you are in your embodiment so that we can all get along. And then a whole bunch of people are locked outside. Right? A whole bunch of qualities of being are not cared for, because we just think about unity, right? The story of unity, that we're all one, becomes a way to disregard how our embodiments are different. So when we talk about this cultivation of the spiritual body, we have to be very careful about this, that we don't say, oh, there's a spiritual body that's aside from the physical body, and that's a spiritual body where everyone is essentially the same. And we don't have to worry about all these struggles we have with our differences and the ways that different embodiments have been dominated and disregarded and disempowered. Right? We need to come at it in a different way. And the way that Buddhism offers us to do that is through the practice of generosity. The practice of generosity is really a radical thing, that we would recognize that I live through receiving from other beings. And if I'm going to live in harmony with that actuality, that I also have to support the life of other beings. And that I can rely on that actively, right? Or I can just sort of try to begrudge it, right? Your body will become the food of something eventually, whether you give it over naturally or willingly or not. If even just the food for the flames of the furnace. This is, a little dark, but it's actually our lot, right? And it doesn't have to be dark. It is really a celebration that our embodiments are not simply something that I own, but it is something which is constantly given and received. That my embodiment is not just a self-satisfaction machine. And last week I had quoted from the Diamond Sutra, where the Buddha is giving a teaching about this generosity. And he says, when we practice true generosity, the body of merit, or the spiritual body, is difficult to measure. He says to Subhuti, he says, look to the east, all the space in the east. Would that be easy to measure? Of course not. There's no way. How can you measure all the space to the east or to the west? Even that new fancy telescope we have that's going to start giving us more really cool pictures in the summer. You can't measure, right? It just goes on forever. He says that is the body. That is the spiritual body when we practice this true giving and receiving. When we cultivate this spiritual body, the individual being is a celebration of the Pure Land. And we read about Pure Lands in the sutras in Buddhism, where a bodhisattva or a Buddha will establish a pure realm in which enlightenment is very quick, or is much easier than it is in this realm. Sorry. This is known as the realm of suffering. But actually, if we listen to the Buddha as he teaches in the Lotus Sutra, for example, which Genjo's been teaching on and will continue, the Buddha says, actually, this is a pure land. Right here. But everyone perceives it as just burning. It's on fire, and there's all kinds of trouble. But actually, this is a land of jeweled trees and the best opportunity for waking up. More on that later. So last week I introduced a poem by Mugai, or Chiono as she was known before she became the first Zen woman teacher in Japan, great abbess of a famous monastery in Kyoto. Mugai, by the way, means no outside. Just let that sit in your brain, and it might connect with something later. That was her Dharma name, Mugai or Chiono. And when she was studying with her teacher, Mugaku, she brought him a poem that goes like this: bucket holds the stream, reflection of moon through pines, dwells in purity. Bucket holds the stream, reflection of moon through pines, dwells in purity. And then after studying with her teacher for some time, said that at the instance of her great awakening, she composed this poem. In this way and that, I tried to save the old pail, as the bamboo strips were weakening and about to break, until at last the bottom fell out. No more water in the pail, no more moon in the water. In this way and that, I tried to save the old pail, as the bamboo strips were weakening and about to break, until at last the bottom fell out. No more water in the pail, no more moon in the water. So these kinds of poems, these kinds of Zen poems they're not usually easy to understand, but that's kind of the point. They're not just about some kind of discursive thinking, about some discursive way of understanding, but they're about what is it to cultivate this spiritual body, this deeply receptive, giving and receiving body that is a reflection of how things are, constantly giving and receiving. And so I think Mugai is a great teacher here about receptivity. A bucket that holds the stream. Think of a stream. We say things like the stream of life, stream of consciousness, stream of being, really, our life stream. There's this constant flow. Like life isn't like a thing, right? It's like a constant stream. It's constant flowing. Everything's always changing. And here, she says, the bucket holds the stream. You ever do that when you're at a stream and you maybe pull out some water to wash your face? That's my favorite thing to do. When you even if it's kind of wintertime and it's cold, summertime, just jump in. Maybe wash your face, then jump in. But if you like that kind of thing. You pick up some water and you wash your face, maybe your forearms, your feet, if it's not too cold, and you just know the river in this way that you can't know any other way. So, maybe that's like what this bucket is like. Of course, there's this rushing river. Right? There's no way to hold it. But you could, actually. You could hold the river. Because any piece of the river is the river. It's right there. So perhaps this is where we can think about the beginning of the practice of receptivity. What does it mean to hold the water? What does it take to cup your hands and hold some water in your hands? It takes a certain kind of care, a certain kind of carefulness. Chiono uses the bucket. Water is, I think in many, if not all cultures, is this symbol for heart or mind, consciousness. So what is it to hold that water and to allow something to be reflected in it? This is our practice of receptivity. This is the conundrum of what it means. Because if you just go and you're like, I'm going to grab the moon from the sky and shove it into my chest, right? Then it doesn't work. You can't do it, actually. Only your heart could be receptive to the moon. The moon in Zen poetry is usually a symbol for awakened mind. But it's not just so simple as that. The moon doesn't just show up in this one way, right? You know, the old sun is pretty standard, you know, it's coming up and going down, and, you know, depending on the clouds, there's different colors or something, but that's just the quality of the sun, you know. Oh, yeah, I'll be farther south in the sky and north, you know, there's such regularity. All of the sun is just so much regularity and power and light. And here's the moon, you know. Chiono doesn't say what kind of moon is reflected, only that it's reflected through the pines, you know. What moon do you see when you first hear that? Did you think of a full moon? Yeah. Or a crescent moon? Or a half moon? Or a dark moon? What would it be for a dark moon to be reflected in the bucket? And this bucket's probably a lacquer bucket. It's probably black. Right? So you can think about that. Yeah. The receptivity of your own heart, mind, feeling, poetic sense, all of those are included in what it means to receive the Dharma from Mugai here through her poem. Right? To let that all be present. Not just the didactic kind of instruction. You know, do this, do this, do this, and then you will be receptive. You know, that's not actually how receptivity works. Dogen Zenji uses a curious term when he talks about practice. He calls it a wondrous method. Myojutsu is the word in Japanese. Jutsu is a little bit like, can mean like art, but maybe craft would be a better word for it. Like a practical art or a subtle craft. You know, for any of you who have done that kind of work, and I hope all of you have in some way, you know, if you think about, I was making a spoon for my grandson a couple weeks ago, and it got down right, I was almost done, and it cracked on the grain. Oh, so I started it again yesterday, another one. But you know, if you're working with wood, right, it's not just like, this is a spoon. You know, it comes out. I mean, actually, if you have a laser machine that can cut it, we have those now, right? You know, and those spoons are a little boring, by the way. They're nice wood, you know, but they're all exactly the same. You know, it's just a machine has taken it out. If you're carving a spoon, then there's always a give and take, right? It's a subtle art. It's not just what can I produce through my mind, right? But there is an interplay. There's a receiving of the material, and there is an offering of your vision. And the material and your vision, they work together for something to begin to emerge. Does this sound like something? Like maybe life? Right? The materiality of your life, the actuality of the things of your life, material and otherwise. And then your work is to bring your heart to it, your vision, but there has to be a receptivity that's coming back and forth for there to be something that emerges. Right? So a practical art, this is this jutsu, and myo means wondrous or subtle, right? Or ungraspable, like covered with illumination. How do we do that? How do we receive and give, receive and give? Now, if I was going to give instructions about this receptivity, really, I think the main thing is you just have to stop. It's a very profound teaching of Zazen. Just stop. Stop. Sit down. That's why when you come to a temple, a Zen temple, People don't, at the first, they're not like, oh, let me tell you all this, and you need to believe this, you need to believe that, you need to do this. And it's like, no, just stop, sit down. Actually, that's what you need to do. Not because the stopping is possible. Not because the stopping means that you will stay in one place, right? The stopping is where you will at first recognize the continual movement. When you're moving around, you think you're stable, you think you're stopped. But when you stop, you realize, oh my gosh, there's a river flowing, right? And this river's flowing. How will I care for this river? How will I know this river? That becomes the question. So stop the body and learn about it. Stop knowing. I would even go so far as to say, stop experiencing. Ugh. It's just like day after day. Do you ever get up every morning and you're just like, oh, man, I'm going to experience this, I'm going to experience that, I'm going to experience this, I'm going to experience that. This kind of experience mindset, is so inverted. It's like life is about what's out there. We are so turned inside out, right? Keep having this image, like we have these eyes, right? And then our whole body, like our spiritual body, our emotional body, all of our bodies, and our physical body is all like pulled through our pupil, like out, like if someone could just reach through your pupil and grab onto your toes and then pull you through. And this is a little bit of a weird image, but, and you just like out. I mean, even your body's outside of yourself, right? All the body image things we have and all this just wildness about pulling out. Everything's pulled out through our pupils into experience. I'm experiencing this, I'm experiencing that. I think about it as like, you got to stop wielding the light. I have this big dislike of headlamps. These ones you strap on. Joichi and Genjo were teasing me about it the other day. You ever been in the woods camping, and someone's got one of those things on? Oh my God, this drives me nuts. It's like, oh yeah, everywhere you see, there's light. Guess what? Everywhere you look, the light is also shining. And all of us here who are in the forest get to enjoy everywhere you're looking. There's just like, lights going everywhere. That's annoying. But actually, for the person with the headlamp on is more annoying. But you don't realize it. Because everything's light. Everything's light means you have no sensitivity to the dark. Actually, you become much dumber with one of those lights on. A lot dumber. Now, if you were like changing the what do you call that thing? The clutch in your car, and you're underneath there, and you need to see exactly where the bolts go, hallelujah. Strap on the headlamp. I'm all for it. It's a very specific task. But just walking around with the headlamp on, you lose so much. Last week I was talking about walking in the path. Dao. This is the term that they translate into Chinese. The way is really what is awakening. When we talk about the path, we're talking about what is awakening. And in China, that would be referred to as Dao. Right? And so what is Dao? What is the way? The way is walking on the path in such a way that includes all of the forest or the mountain or the desert or whatever it is that the path is coming through. All the things you don't look at, that you can't see, they are included in the walking. Right? That's the receptivity. So when we just turn the headlamp on, if we take these headlamps, my aversion for them in the material world is one thing. But if we think about what's happening in our consciousness when we're operating that way, wherever we look, it's just light on, light, that's what's there. We lose everything. Right? We lose everything else that's not right there in our vision. Right? We lose receptivity. We turn everything inside out. And that all becomes about what's true. And the part of us that we can't see, our own internal being, which is ungraspable, will not respond to that kind of light wielding. Right? It empties out. We feel hollow, unsatisfied. We don't know where to go. We don't know what to do. So just stopping the habit of knowing, of wielding the light, of trying to get something or having an experience. This is a shifting to receiving receiving rather than experiencing. That my being is received. You know what I consider experience is not just something that's out there that I am experiencing. It is in here too. This bucket of water is reflecting the moon. That's happening all the time, right? It's easier to notice with beautiful things or things that touch you in some way. And everyone has their own kind of way with that, right? Like, of course, everyone loves a plum blossom or, a western bluebird or kestrel, these kind of things. We all love that. It lifts our heart in some way. Or a vista, if you're hiking in the woods and you come and you can see out over a valley and there's a river. All of these things, just the reflection is really, it's kind of immediate. But you might have some other kind of weirder things. Like, I'll share one thing I super duper love, corrugated metal. Like a little shack that's made with corrugated metal, like on the side and on the roof, and like a little bit rusted. I just totally turns my crank. I don't know why, but it's like very simple, like this kind of just like, oh, it's just here, So who knows what it is for you? I'm not asking you to like corrugated metal, but you become sensitive to that. That's part of this receptivity. What is it that would appear in the stream that is held in your bucket that you would notice? Chiono notices the moon. What would you notice? So the receiving of self is the basis of this art. Holding the stream, receiving luminosity in whatever form it appears to you, and dwelling in purity. There is a purity there. Purity in this case means no outside. It means there's not a moon and a bucket. Right? They're inseparable. When we hear the word purity in Buddhism, it means like non-duality. It doesn't mean like getting rid of all of the dirty stuff, right? Which is the way we normally think of purity. And we have a lot of, if you've grown up in North America, we have a lot of hang-ups on the purity thing. Guaranteed. If you think you don't have hang-ups about purity, you're wrong. You do. Okay? So pay attention to that. Where are those? Right? Purity here in Buddhism, the reason I think it's a good translation is because it knocks on our hang-ups. So the very important thing here in practicing this is don't impose it. That mind that wants to experience, think, oh, that's great, that sounds wonderful. I want to be Chiono. Okay, how do I do that? I get my bucket together, and then we try to do that. But that's the wrong tack. Don't impose it. Don't use that dominating, disregarding, disempowering spirit that goes in there to kind of make things the way that it wants to be and says, no, you belong over here, you belong over here. This is the part of you that's really the good part of you. It's like a bucket that reflects things. We're going to put you on center stage and everybody else you need to go back. That part of your mind? No. That's what will happen if you try to impose this. So my suggestion is you follow your yearning for it. Right? Rather than imposing it, you follow your yearning for it. You follow your yearning for that kind of seeing, that kind of reflecting, that kind of receiving of the world, which my experience is that everyone yearns for it. And sometimes we have some really dysfunctional ways of trying to get it. Right? And so don't just look in the tidy places, but look in all the ways that you may try to enact that reflection. Feel the yearning for that kind of receiving and giving that happens, the kind of deep freedom there. Sometimes you'll hear people talk about the zone. You hear about like basketball players getting in the zone. Have you heard that term before? And it's cheesy, you know. And then there's these people who supermarket it and they become like the official zone teachers and teach people how to get in the zone or whatever it is, you know. But the thing about it is, you know, stuff that's the really nice stuff that people can sell for a lot of money, the reason they can is because it's good stuff. You know, the fact they're selling it might be a problem. It might, you know, or who knows, I don't care. But that zone, that's what I'm talking about. Where can you receive yourself in such a way that you forget yourself? I'm saying that very carefully. Receiving yourself so you can forget yourself. Not just saying, I want to try to get rid of myself, but the place in which you can deeply receive, in which your own experiencing, your own grasping, all of those things are not so important to you. You have that yearning. You wouldn't be here if you didn't, unless someone just dragged you here this morning. Yeah, you have a discussion with them about that afterwards. Yeah. So that zone, that place where you just slip over, what is it for you? You know? Doku's a skateboarder. He's a good skateboarder. Does he look like a skateboarder? Kind of. So, you know, like when you're on your skateboarder, it's like there's a zone, right? There's some place where you can't be thinking about all of the things, but you have to be receiving all of the things to be able to not fall on your head. Is that fair? Yeah. Putting you on the spot. Say what I think. But all of us have that somewhere, you know? I try not to talk about my grandson too much, but sorry, he's super cute. If you had the pleasure of taking care of a baby, the zone, and now it's like just so out of your hands, you know? It's so out of your hands, and yet you're totally involved, and it's totally, like literally, in your hands at the same time. You know, what is the receiving that's there? Is a receiving of a cry, receiving of tiredness, receiving of happiness, receiving of excitement, all of those things which you're there to help guide, to receive and to give, so that this being knows about receiving and giving. Actually, everything's like that. And in caring for a child, we get to see this most sacred thing, which is how do we carry on the freedom of that giving and receiving generationally? How do we reflect that in each other? Which we all do here. But when you're charged with caring for a baby, you have some other opportunity. So that's my encouragement to you in the honing of this no technique receptivity is what is it in your life? I mean, meditation, of course. But it's not just about meditation in terms of meditation being, you know, sitting up straight on a cushion. What is it that you've been entrusted with, that you receive over and over again? And how can you simply let that reflection be there? Because when you do, all of the binding that you do to try to keep this bucket together, you know, Chiono, the voice in this poem kind of sounds like it was too bad that the bamboo was getting weak and that the bucket was going to come apart, right? Like, I tried to keep it together because it was coming apart. But there's also a celebration there, right? The bamboo strap that keeps it together is coming apart. Of course, my reaction is like, whoa, keep it together, keep it together, keep it together. Right? But that's the other side, is, you know, that reflection ultimately will show you the ungraspability of your own being. And all of this internal vacuum gets revealed as a mirror. Time maybe just for one question this morning. Anyone on you?
the risk of misquoting,
Mm-hmm.
what is the Dogen quote? Or this is what your talk is reminding me of, letting the myriad things come to you. Is that correct?
Yeah, this is a quote, that one of the quotes I read last week. Conveying oneself toward all things to carry out practice enlightenment is delusion. All things coming and carrying out practice enlightenment through the self is realization. Those who greatly realize delusion are Buddhas. This is wonderful. Those who greatly realize delusion are Buddhas. Not those who greatly escape from delusion are Buddhas. Those who realize delusion, they illuminate delusion. They don't separate from delusion. Right? Those are Buddhas. Those who are greatly deluded about realization are sentient beings. That's us, by the way. Great.
Would it be okay, read it again?
Sure. Conveying oneself toward all things to carry out practice enlightenment is delusion. All things coming and carrying out practice enlightenment through the self is realization. Those who greatly realize delusion are Buddhas. Those who are greatly deluded in realization are living beings. Furthermore, there are those who attain realization beyond realization and those who are deluded within delusion. I'm going to read a little bit more because this is just great. When Buddhas are truly Buddhas, they don't need to perceive that they are themselves Buddhas. However, they are enlightened Buddhas and they continue actualizing Buddha. In seeing color with body and mind, in hearing sounds with body and mind, although we perceive them intimately, it is not like reflections in a mirror or the moon in water. When one side is illuminated, the other side is dark. So this was something that I had read last week, that we think about reflection as always being like the moon in the water, and the moon's in the water, and the moon's in the sky. But what Chiono realizes, and Dogen is reverberating here, is that the completeness of reflection, there's not two moons. There's not a moon in the sky and a moon in the water. There's no water held. There's no moon in the water. There is only the moon, which is neither in the sky nor in the water. It is simply the moon. It's very Zen, right? It's very Zen. But
where that comes from, that quote?
Genjo Koan. Genjo Koan, yeah. I just want to encourage people that there is a way, and when this very Zen kind of way of talking about things, it feels very mysterious, and then you think like, all these people get it, and I don't get it, and I just kind of like, I don't know, could I just maybe do like something simpler, just tell me what the meditation is, etc. I sympathize. And I want to encourage you that kind of poetic expressions, those kind of, they're so alive in you. You are just filled with these impressions. And they did a survey. I was reading in a poetry magazine a couple years ago. They did a survey about how many people write poetry. It's tons. Many of you right here write poems and don't tell anyone because you're embarrassed about it and you think your poem maybe isn't good enough, right? But I just want to say your poem is not just good enough, it is absolutely vital to your life. And if you have to ignore other things like your pride, please do. Because all of this very Zen sounding stuff, it's not a trick. It's not like there's no trick inside of it. But it seems like there is when you don't resonate with something, you think there's some trick in it and everyone else knows the trick and you don't know the trick, or the teacher knows the trick and you don't know the trick. That's not what's going on. It's just resonance. And as you gain more intimacy with and familiarity with the imagery that is used in the teachings, kind of Zen style of teaching, you will start to feel those reverberations for you. Like if you had never heard about the moon being this symbol of awakening before, or enlightenment, you heard that today. When you see the moon, you will see a different moon than you saw before you heard that. I don't know what that will be. You don't know what it will be. When you see it, you won't even know what it is. You won't know what moon it is that you see that's different than the moon you saw before. But it doesn't matter, right? There's something that's happening through our being that's always changing and shifting and waking up in that way. So this is what the Zen school really relies on. And so sometimes it just sounds very kind of confusing or like a little like, oh, I couldn't grasp it. Well, that's sort of the point, because not grasping it requires you to give up on the grasping it and give over to the receiving. Right, that's my, if I had some pom-poms, I would shake them.
I'm glad I asked.
This and all our teachings are offered free of charge. If you would like to make a donation, please visit our website at buddhaeye.org and click the donate button at the top of the page. Thanks.